Welcome to Aging Under the North Star, your trusted podcast for aging, caregiving, and senior living. I'm your host, Veronica, and today joining me is Dr. Josh Freitas. Thank you so much, Dr. Josh, for joining me. You are a wealth of knowledge, but not only that, you're a friend and a mentor, and I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. There are two important topics that I'd like to discuss in today's podcast, but first I want to start with the number one that really had me intrigued, and it was very eye-opening for me when we were training with you, and I say we, me and some of my team members were training with you, and it was the psychology of color. This was like, wow, like eye-opening for me. And so research, it suggests that specific colors often trigger emotional responses for those living with dementia. Can you describe what that means and get into like the philosophy of color?
Yeah, sure thing. So through the aging pendulum, color affects us differently. So we might associate things like red might be associated with eating in the middle of life, but also that can be applied later on and providing contrast. But as we age, we also see colors differently as well. So even things like soft greens or soft blues might have an emotional appeal in some aspect, but then also being able to see our vision is changing. So what happens is we get a yellow film over the eye, changing the colors that we see. So some colors actually pop more or pop less, and that can actually trigger some of the behaviors. And if we apply them the right way, we can minimize some dementia behaviors as well.
Ah, okay. So I'm glad you touched on that. So you mentioned the colors. So in the different stages of dementia and the different, you mentioned aging, the different stages of dementia, does that also mean that the colors change with the different stages?
So people become more reliant on what they can see. So on face value, people might trigger things. So like you and I drive down the road and we see a yellow sign, we know what it means because we've been conditioned. That stuff can actually return with dementia. So there's 7 stages known as the global deterioration scale, or the 3 phases. But as people go further in their disease journey, they actually become more reliant on it. So if they have more color contrast, they might be actually more drawn to things like fiesta colors or bright colors. So colored uniforms, colored plates, that might actually pull their behavior. And I won't go too deep, but there's something called retrogenesis, that the first things in life are the last things we lose. And a lot of things that we see with adolescents, like bright color crayons or bright toys, that comes back, but it's our job to make sure it's dignified. So having a pen that might be a brighter color for them to be able to identify, or a uniform color to actually help orient who is their caregiver, all of those things become more reliant on the person with dementia.
Can you get into the actual colors, the recognizable colors, the strong dominant colors, and their meaning?
Yeah, sure thing. So different colors have different behaviors. Some is theoretical and some is actually evidence-based. So I know at Certus what we've done is we've had each department wear different colors and observed how we can improve care. So for example, all caregivers wear the color lime green. And what we noticed is when we did this is we had a reduction in sundowning behavior because people could identify who to go to. That green popped. So it's one of the more prevalent colors they see. Oh. So we actually want our caregivers to pop out more than other employees because that's where they're going to get their help. But what we notice is dark blue will suppress that engagement. So we put our maintenance in dark blue, so they're not going to if they need help to go to the bathroom. And then light blue can actually foster that engagement sequence to get people to engage more. And the color purple, and we won't get into the science, but will be stolen more than any other color. So we actually put our nurses in that. So the 2 people they're primarily going to is caregivers in green, but then also purple for their nurses. And the last one is a color red stimulates appetite. So we put everybody that works in our dining experience in red. And what we notice is subtle changes in everyone's behavior. Mm-hmm. But one of the biggest thing I thought was fascinating is the color black from the kneecap down is perceived as scary. So we actually decided to have all of our caregivers wear tan pants and white shoes. And what we noticed is people with Lewy bodies, Parkinson's, or Huntington's, their behaviors went away because they weren't seeing that peripheral deficit below the knees, and they actually fostered better care. We could get closer to them. So those subtle changes, though you and I would look at them and say, oh, it's just a color change, it actually has a whole behavior change for those with dementia.
That's interesting. So how do you know, like, okay, so you have a new resident that moves in, right? How long does it take for them to understand who is who by recognizing those colors?
Yeah, so there's actually a length of time that people take to acclimate to new environments, about 35 days, 5 weeks. What we notice is some of the trigger points is people will say, I need somebody in green. I need somebody in green. So you can see that the people, even with cognitive challenges, can identify that person in green can help me, and actually they'll go directly to that person and ask for help. So we actually can shape that behavior. We see that around that month to 5 week mark.
Right. That's awesome. Okay. So that helps families actually, and I'm sure, when they're transitioning their loved one, it's a whole emotional roller coaster, and a lot of families ask us, like, are they going to constantly want to come home? Are they going to keep wanting to come home? Every time I come here, it's been challenging, and they don't know who's who. I think the colors will definitely be beneficial for them in any environment that they're at, including home. So if they're home, how do you tell caregivers to address these colors within their home environment?
Yeah, I'll give you a real example. I had somebody just recently, she said, well, my husband has dementia and that's why he's not flushing the toilet. So I listened to this, but when I did the home assessment, what I noticed is that the toilet was all white. So the flusher was white, the top was white, and my recommendation is always to have a contrast toilet seat. But what I also recommended is, what if we popped off the flusher and painted it lime green, more prevalent color? We did that, and the lady called me literally a week later and was like, he's flushing the toilet all the time. It just literally took us painting the flusher a different color. But even the outlets, I hear a lot of people with dementia like to sit in the dark. People with dementia don't like dark spaces, so that's typically not what would be normal. Is if you even take light switches and paint the little flicker a different color, that helps them identify a white wall with a white light switch. They can find it easier. So now they can actually turn it on and not be sitting in the dark. So small features like that at home can be very powerful. A lot of people I hear say use a black rug because people with dementia won't walk across it. I don't always like to scare people that way, but the color black from the kneecap can be perceived as scary, and that could be a reason why somebody doesn't go into a bank or to a restaurant. They might not want to step over that rug.
I'm glad you mentioned black rug, because sometimes you go into buildings and the entryway has the black rug, common. I see memory care communities put the black rug or sometimes very dark flooring, and there's a lot more falls, there's a lot more behavioral confusion, where they don't want to step over a certain area because of the dark rugs. What does the black rug do for someone with dementia?
It's perceived as a whole. So I'm not the biggest fan. You have to weigh safety and the black rug. Black rug could be scary, where if you and I felt trapped in, we might have some behaviors too. But I can almost predict this is, if somebody walks into a community with a black rug and it's inside, you might smell urine. And the reason is that it's perceived as a whole, and many residents with dementia will actually urinate on that black rug. So yes, it's a pro and con, but you have to be very sensitive to who's actually in that community. And a scare tactic isn't always the best. Actually, research shows if you just paint the door the same color as the wall, you can reduce that wandering behavior just as effectively without scaring people. You're just making less attention to it.
Right.
And you see things like bookshelves and other things too.
Yeah. I've seen bookshelves. So to me, knowing myself, I've seen a bookshelf painted as a door. I would go over there because I'm a reader, right? I would be standing there trying to, get to that book. So I like that idea of painting the area the same as the wall, because it just blends in. You're not going to even think to go in that direction.
In small features, like I say, things of normalcy. So you might even have a door that you can't camouflage. Is you might actually make it look like a closed booth and have a closed sign on it. People behaviorally would walk and say, oh, they must be closed today, and walk right past it, versus having that attention. So sometimes earlier stages, you can still use those. So environmental cues can be very powerful.
Yeah, that's interesting. See, it makes me want to open a memory care. So all jokes aside, I really think if we've had some clients, mutual clients, that have said things similar to the whole toilet flushing. But if you go into like a memory care, and some memory care directors will say, so-and-so is urinating in the tree or in the plant. What are some things families can do to avoid that? Yeah.
So there's actually a case study that just came out that showed that that black mulch or that black soil looks like a hole, so they will urinate. And sometimes people will say nature and trees and people want to go to the bathroom. What they showed is if you just put white rock on it, if it's safe, and maybe even glue the rock down, it deters that person to go to the bathroom because they can see it's not a hole.
Right.
So small things like that can be very powerful. And I also have to say, sometimes behaviors, they're a way of communicating, but sometimes you can use them to solve issues. So I've had a lot of residents that urinate in bathrooms or in their bedrooms in a residential. One thing to do is actually buy small little black trash barrels and put them out. As they urinate in them, you slowly move it to the bathroom, and you condition their spatial awareness to learn where that bathroom is. So then you don't need them anymore. So you can actually leverage the behavior sometimes to actually solve issues.
We're transitioning into my next question. Can someone with dementia learn something new?
Absolutely.
I love
So
this.
this is the biggest challenge, and I hear it from the medical community, and I've had people reach out and say people with dementia can't learn, and that is completely false.
Right.
People with dementia can still learn. They learn differently. They learn on emotional-based knowledge, how my environment is perceived, and that alone can be really powerful. I would argue with anybody that says somebody with dementia can't learn. I'll give you an example. You sit in that seat every day at lunch in a memory care community. I come down and somebody else is in my seat. You see that aggression. Get that person out of my seat. That's my seat.
Mm-hmm.
That shows the person with dementia can still learn. It just takes them longer.
Right.
And we won't spend too much time on it, but we actually have three brains, and that actually gets strengthened. The emotional-based knowledge is our enteric nervous system and neurovascular system. So we have to think people with dementia are relying on emotional-based knowledge, how you make me feel, my routine, my approach, and what a space communicates to me.
That is amazing. I have to agree with you. I've seen those with dementia. They are relearning every day, right? Especially if they, like you said, there's consistency, and which is something that they need, the true consistency of their scheduled day or activities, things that they do on a daily basis. I was just talking to a friend of mine because she was asking me for some help, and she said, my dad isn't showering. He came to visit. He drove down, or him and her brother drove down from out of state, and he didn't shower the whole 5 days. And I kept saying, Dad, go shower. And I'm like, well, he's not in his environment, number one. He heard go shower, but he doesn't know what to do in your home. I'm like, so next time, like, try laying his clothes out, try directing him, turn the water on for him, if he can in fact still shower himself. But if he can't, that's a whole other topic we can get into, how to shower those that are refusing to bathe. He's not refusing, he just didn't really know. It's kind of like you have to kind of redirect him and train him to do that. How does that happen in a facility or when someone's transitioning into a community, especially the first few days that, they're reconditioning their mind to know where the bathroom is from bed and so on?
So one thing is don't push it. If it's 1 or 2 days and not taking a shower, it's okay. You also don't want to create frustration between the caregiver and the resident. So sometimes a day or two without a shower, it's okay, unless there's an accident or something like that. But I also say that we're about 40 to 50% habit. So sometimes it's actually showing them the shower. So not a caregiver saying, it's time for a shower, it's time for a shower, but actually bringing you into the shower, turning it on, putting even some, like a bottle of soap in your hands and saying, it's time to take a shower. Those visual cues, they might actually see that and know, okay, it's time to take a shower. Mm-hmm. There's other things too. If somebody's not taking a shower, they have shower in a bag, they have other things. I've seen people put body wash in balloons and do a balloon toss so it gets them wet. A non-traditional thing, I'm not telling people to go out there and spill stuff on residents, not saying that at all, especially if it's hot or cold. But I have in the past have had a resident that wouldn't shower for almost a week. And the only thing I could think of doing is people with dementia don't like to be wet. Mm-hmm. So I accidentally bumped a glass, got a little bit of water on their leg and said, oh, come on, let's go get you changed. And as soon as they were derobing, I could bring them right in the bathroom, get them showered, and then get them out. So sometimes you just got to think a little differently on how you approach things. I'm not saying to go out and pour stuff on people, but sometimes that little discomfort will allow you to trigger them into what you need them to do for their hygiene too, right, as well.
Exactly. No, that's all of this is very interesting because you can go from colors to, this dementia is just such an, what's the word? It's such an interesting way to care for someone. There are so many ways and so many research and opinions, but things that have actually worked, especially working with Freitas, we've seen it. And Freitas, by the way, for our listeners, is a standalone memory care community, person-centered memory care community, and that's what I enjoy most working with Freitas because it's one of a kind. It really is. It's thought out in every single corner of each crevice in that community.
And it's cool to see the residents actually pick the music and they're helping with the menus. But one thing I think is so fascinating is the whole industry has difficulties from time to time with hiring. Is we have a resident hiring committee. So the residents actually interview all the people that come in. And it's amazing to see that a caregiver will come in and the resident in the right environment will start asking all these questions that you would never expect. Mm-hmm. But it's a great screening tool to see how they interact. And it's amazing to see when you hire that person, the residents remember that that's the person they hired. And it's fascinating to see, we say, oh, they have dementia, but they remember specific things from the interview. And I think that is something to celebrate is there is ways to help somebody remember certain things. It might always be 100% accurate, but it's also their right to continue to explore that.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that. That's amazing. That's so impressive. So now I want to move on from the philosophy of colors and things like that, and talk about what's very important in our industry, placement, the families that we help, because as you know, it's an emotional landscape moving your person into a memory care. A lot of times people don't want to face memory care, let alone they don't even want to face assisted living without memory care, right? So standalone memory care or memory care in general, transitioning is often described as like one of the most emotional and in some words, some people have used the word tragic decision that they've ever had to make, because it's very personal, it's deeply personal, it's their person. So from your point of view, you've been working with those residents in your community, and you mentioned about 35 days for them to adjust. What is going on the first few weeks in their mind, in their world, in this new environment?
Yeah, so they're changing things, and their body's telling them a lot of things, and change is really difficult. So I say try to minimize transitional trauma as much as possible, personalizing the room, giving exposure before they move in, having a really good facade story. So sometimes people say you're only coming in for a period of time while we're fixing your house. But those therapeutic fiblets can be very powerful. And oftentimes I see this a lot, that the caregiver is really stressed out because they might be asked to stay away for a few days. And there's sometimes people can come in on the first day, it's great. Sometimes people need a week or two to really transition. I find that the caregivers are more impacted than the resident. And I've seen this from time to time, that the resident is participating in all the programs, and then the family will come in and they'll all of a sudden cue and say, why did you put me here? And they go from enjoying to all of a sudden cueing towards you. That can be incredibly challenging for a caregiver to hear that. So I think it's getting familiar with that, but also work with wherever you're moving and see if there's a transition program. So maybe it's a respite, or maybe it's a day program that you can go and participate 2-3 days a week. They can get in the groove of things, and then you can move in. But I see that the best transition plans are the ones where it's created by the resident, the person, the family, and also the community. If they all work together, that's going to be the best way. And even small things like this, Veronica, is if they bring the same bed they've slept in, research actually shows they transition much faster to a new community because their body recognizes that mattress.
Right.
So I think small things like that to be aware of can help with that process quite a bit.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've had families, I'm going to buy a brand new bed. I have always said like the same thing. If you can bring something that they are accustomed to sleeping in, whether it's their chair or whatever the case may be, because sometimes they have recliners, bring that. Even if you're in a facility that's furnished, right? Brings all that stuff from home to make the familiarity, and have them get used to their room and their environment a lot. Like, this is my space,
For sure.
right? Like, anyway, that goes for anyone, in general. So.
And I want to do this because I think it's really powerful. Is for families, is wherever you're looking, is you should ask the community, this is my mom, tell them about your mom, and say, what residents do you think would fit with her well? I noticed that if you can pair up residents with similar interests or social abilities or capabilities, and you put them at lunch together, that can be a really great, quick transition, is then they actually rely on each other. So that's a great question to ask, is this is my mom, this is what she likes, what other residents could you see her connecting with, and then trying to get them to connect on the first day.
I love that. Yeah, so like a veteran with a veteran, or someone from Boston, with another person from Boston, or something we're familiar. Yeah, that's great. Actually, I had something which, by force of nature, I'm originally from California, and I was helping a family from California, and we happened to tour this memory care community, and this person went to the same high school as my clients.
So cool.
Yeah, I'm like, what are the odds of that? So another person from California, and of course they became friends. Rumor has it they started dating. So that was cute. Okay, in your opinion, one of the biggest fears families have is wondering, will they ever feel at home here? That's the whole guilt.
Yeah.
And I know you said it takes up to 35 days. Do they ever feel at home?
A lot of times they do. Sometimes they will have a disconnect for a longer period of time. Research actually shows 90 days to create a lifestyle change. So sometimes it might go beyond that 35 days, but beyond acclimating. But I hear this story a lot in our support groups is I usually have the newer people in the support group share their stories, and a lot of it is, well, are they going to feel like home? This comes up all the time. And usually the other people that have been in the support group longer are like, yes, let me tell you a story. And oftentimes what they share is they feel like they're not going to acclimate, but then they go bring them out to lunch and they say, I want to go home.
Yeah.
And they specifically ask to come back to the community. And I see that more and more, that over time this person will identify this as a place of home. And I always tell people home is not always a physical structure, but it's a feeling. So if they can feel comfortable and they feel at home, that's where they're going to want to return to. So that's why I see a lot of people over time, they do refer to our community as home. And I've had people say, oh, well, I actually brought them by the house. And they said, no, I don't live there anymore. I live back at Sturgis, or I live wherever. But I hear that a lot in residential. So I feel like once they get over that threshold and they create connection, they will associate it as home. Not in every case, but in most cases.
That's amazing. What are some things families do that can make the transition harder? I know, for example, I am a big proponent of therapeutic fiblets, redirecting, things like that, going into their world, redirecting the conversation. And oftentimes some fiblets, it's not hurting them. But there are families that often say, I will never lie to my parent or my person. What are some things that some families do that make the transition harder, and what do you suggest?
Sometimes, first you have to meet them where they are. So sometimes they might not be able to handle the truth, and it's going to actually set us further back. And if you don't feel comfortable giving that therapeutic fiblet, try to come up with some pocket phrases of redirection that aren't fully lies. Like, I'm not sure, let me find out more about that. Or, hey, I still got to call them, I haven't had a chance. Or even just say, hey, I've been so busy with the grandkids, I haven't had a chance to follow up on that. Having those things where you don't have to fully lie, but at least push it down the road a little bit can be a good way to kind of soften that. Something else that makes it a little difficult is getting some education and exposure to what is going on. So I always share like small things families don't always realize, but saying goodbye. When I say goodbye to somebody with dementia, they don't remember the person saying goodbye, but they know something's missing. So what happens is they're frustrated and they're looking. They feel like someone left or abandoned. But research actually shows if you say, see you soon, see you tomorrow, or just leave, a lot of times that can be a much easier way that they'll just go participate. So even the words that we use can actually trigger some of those behaviors. So families really need to get some exposure to what is going on. Also, there's over 100 different types of dementia, and knowing what type your loved one has will actually change the things that you can do. If they have frontal temporal dementia, they're not going to have a filter. So learning how to do that. Or if it's Alzheimer's short-term memory. So getting more aware of the types of dementia can actually let you be part of the team. I also share with families, as hard as it is, try to let that caregiving hat go and let the community take that and do those things. Try to just be there and show up as the family member. So you don't have to ask, have you taken your pills? Have you done this? Have you done that? Because that can trigger some stuff.
Exactly.
Go and actually listen to their favorite song, talk about a story, bring a photo album. Look at those things as look at the things not as a caregiver, but as the actual family member.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I love that because there have been instances where families do, like you said, they come in, did you get your shower today? And the person saying no when they really had their shower that day, or they're asking them yes or no questions that they, their concept of time isn't there. They're not sure. And so you get that upset family member going to the care staff. You didn't shower my loved one. And it's like, yeah, I did, Yeah,
and don't always believe everything your loved one says. And not saying that it's a lie, but sometimes their mind is processing things differently. So they might say stuff like, they told me I couldn't have any food today. I hear that a lot. But in reality, the residents had 2 plates of food already for lunch. So just check in with those things because it can create some friction. Or don't just say, yes, no, the staff already told me you had 2 plates. Just say, hey, I'll go check in with the staff. You got to kind of meet them where they are.
Right.
And caregivers, if you get a chance, I think one of the best ways is as a family, do some improv. Talk about how you would address questions as a group. How would you redirect? I find that families that do that type of prep before they come in have much better visits.
I love that. I think that's amazing. And finally, because we can go into this all day long. This is like so fascinating. I love talking about dementia, especially with families and the caregivers, and just from the mind of those who are living with dementia. It's very impressive to know and kind of understand the things that like they can be retaught, and they, there was an instance at one point I remember, and I always tell families, you met one person with dementia, you've only met one person with dementia, right? Everyone's story and journey is different. I met this, I was on a tour and there was an activities director who was talking in front of the person, which that's like my biggest no-no. And they were saying, oh, we don't take her for walks anymore because she just bails and she just runs and she's just gone. And the resident there was like, who, me? Are you talking about me? You're not going to take me for walks? And it stirred something up. So just watching how you say, when you say it, and in front of your person, I think is very important, because they may act like they're not understanding you, but they can pick up on certain things. They do understand and feel. They feel a lot. So your tone, the way you approach them, there's so much that's going on. I mean, when I do my consultations with families, and my families always tell me on the side, they're like, I am so thankful that you spoke to her when you were doing your assessment. You weren't asking questions to me about her. I'm like, no, I'm here for her or him. I'm sitting there and I am eye level to them, and I'm just having a conversation with them. It's enjoyable, and it takes that, because if I'm just talking to that family and about the community, they're asking, what's going on? Why are you talking about me? Where am I going? Where are you putting me? I don't want to stir the pot, and I don't want to set them agitation and getting their feelings, flustered when there's no need for that. So the way you talk to people is important, and just don't talk at them, and it's all of that's very important.
I have to add to that too. Oftentimes I feel like we steal the voice of the person with dementia, and we lose the ability to see where they are based on what they're feeling. So if I just speak on their behalf all the time, we can't hear where their mindset is. And then what we do is we automatically hold them to our mindset, and then that's where we have friction. So I feel like sometimes we shouldn't be talking over or past or having the person on the side. We should include their voice as much as possible. There are times where you're going to have to talk to a doctor privately, but in front of them, let the person try to answer the questions. That's what the doctor will see them fumbling on words, having aphasia, and they can help with a diagnostic. And I feel like this is my own peeve, but I feel like a lot of things get overlooked because we do all the speaking for the person with dementia. And really we have to let them speak, and then we have to meet them where they are and then fill in the gaps.
Yeah, speaking for them or correcting in front of someone else. That's,
I heard this recently. It's not about correction, it's about connection. So I feel like if you're correcting them, you're losing that connection.
Yep.
And I love that phrase. I don't know where it came from, but I love it.
Oh, there's another one we got to trademark. Kick the can and
Connect, don't correct.
Yeah, connect, don't correct. And finally, I just have one more thing. Sometimes families witness increased agitation, withdraw, repeated requests to go home, which we talked about, or a visible decline in their loved one shortly after a move. How should families interpret these warning signs, and when is it a normal part of the adjustment versus a genuine red flag? So I guess my question would be, when should they have that red flag? Because, families, when they first move their person in, it's always a red flag. Everything is a red flag. They didn't shower, they didn't eat, they didn't this, when is it a true red flag?
A true red flag, I would say, if it's interfering with quality of life. So if the person seems like they're slowing down a little bit because they just adjusted to a new place, they might be tired. You got to think of all the new faces. All that can be draining. So give it a little bit of time, and then if there's medical professionals there, work with them, take notes. What you're going to want to do is look for patterns. So when you see something starting to surface or there's a change, the other thing is medications, and I think asking a medical provider, can you look at the medications? I've seen changes, but I think consistency is really, really important. So if you see that it's happened for a little bit, now it's starting to bounce back, that's a little different. Sometimes we can overreact. I'm not telling people not to, but it's not always dementia. And I'll share an example. Is I heard this person is always saying people are breaking in. They're breaking in, they're breaking in. And what it actually came down to was actually what the staff was doing. No fault of theirs, but the company had a policy where they used flashlights for room checks. So they would open it, shine it in, and go to each room. The resident identified, ooh, that is them breaking in. But everybody kept saying, oh, their dementia's getting worse, they're getting worse, and they're having hallucinations. But it really was being triggered by what we were doing. So I also think we have to step back and say, what are we doing as the neurotypical people that might be contributing to this? And maybe it's not allowing them to have access. Because one thing I see this sometimes, people will move in and they're like, they have dementia, they can't go on the outing because I don't want them to get lost. They can't do this, they can't have access to this, they can't call people, they can't. When we restrict, the brain automatically goes into defense mode. So I think that it's finding alternatives. So maybe the first outing is not getting off the bus, but just going for a ride to see how they do with that,
Yeah.
and then stepping. So I think trying to allow as much freedom, safe freedom, and try to limit the restrictions as much as possible. Because I think that that's where I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, something's wrong. And it's because we've pulled so much away from people. And also don't just jump to conclusions too. And it's not, sometimes people just need a rest day.
Yeah.
I've seen this too where I had a family not too long ago, they're like, he's tired all the time. And I said, well, you're coming in after work at 6 o'clock and he literally participates in the 4 physical activities that they have in the day. So he has a lot. So I said, maybe try to come in really early on the days before work. So they would come in at 7 and they're like totally different person.
Different, yeah.
So not all the times is it the disease. They might be doing things that are different in their lifestyle that just might make them tired. So don't jump to conclusions either.
I love that. I definitely do. Well, I really think that there's so much we can talk about, like I keep saying. And if a family member has questions, is there a way that they can reach you?
Yeah, sure thing. Actually, have them reach out to you, and then you can kick them over to
Okay.
me. But I'm happy to answer any questions, and I volunteer every Wednesday from 12 to 1 just to answer questions for families.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, if you have something that you're seeing or wanting to safeguard the house, just give us a call, and we'll try to help navigate you through it.
I love that. Safeguarding the house, memory care options, and just answering those confusing questions and families that blame themselves, like the challenges that they're facing with their person. So thank you again for joining us.
Oh, thank you for
and
having
for
me.
just being here, and I hope to have you on here soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.